On today's show, we talk about Chris Patrick's plans for this team. He's a new GM trying to make his mark. What can we expect from him? I'll discuss next on this edition of Locked On Capitals.
Your Locked On Capitals, your daily podcast on the Washington Capitals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Well, hello and welcome into this edition of Locked On Capitals. I'm so glad you decided to join me today. As always, this podcast is free and available on all the major platforms, including the SiriusXM app and on YouTube. And I want to thank you for making this your first listen each and every day. My name is Dan Holme. I've covered the Capitals for the last 3 seasons for Locked On and various other platforms before that. I'm also the host of the weekly show called The Capitals Minutecast, available wherever you find your podcasts. You can find me on Twitter. It's at DanCaps218. You can find the show on Twitter. It's at Locked On Caps. And the best way you can help grow the show is to subscribe to Locked On Capitals on YouTube and comment anything down below. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. So in this edition of Locked On Capitals, I talk about new GM Chris Patrick's plans for this team. I mean, what are some of the things that we know about the Capitals? Is that they are an aging roster that is getting younger. There is a lot of youth that's being added to this team. This team got younger on July 1st. And the Capitals and Chris Patrick have to have their eyes set to the future in the post-Ovechkin era. We'll talk about that a little bit later. We'll talk about how Terik Parisek signed a contract with the Capitals. And then in the final segment, Leon Muggli and his future with the Capitals as well. But just to get it going here, this is a bonus episode as there is a lot to cover around the Capitals right now. I don't know if you guys noticed it. They were very active at the draft. They were very active on July 1st and well before July 1st for that matter. This team is making big changes. And, former GM Brian McClellan said he was going to be active. I don't think anyone thought he was going to be this active. And then you take a look at the other movement surrounding the Capitals going out and buying Cap Friendly. Who knew that was a thing? And then Chris Patrick getting promoted to the position of GM of this team. There's a lot that has changed on the Capitals here in short order. And a lot of the things that were question marks, I think, are being answered. The questions with the forwards, the blue line, and ultimately, what is the leadership going to be like on the Capitals? We know that Spencer Carberry is the guy behind the bench leading this team in the direction that it should go. But now they have a new GM in Chris Patrick, but no stranger to the organization. And when he was formally introduced to the media, one of the things that Ted Leonsis said is they talked about these guys' history in business. And sometimes you look at these guys and you think to yourself, how did they get here? How did GM Brian McClellan, how did he get here? And how did Chris Patrick, how did they arrive here? And what was their trajectory? Well, most of these guys have a history in business. Chris Patrick, in particular, had a history in the energy sector and that kind of thing with a lot of responsibilities. He said some of the things is that he managed a small group of people. He also managed a large group of people. And one of the things that Ted Leonsis talked about is that the NHL is changing. The leadership, the general managers, it's not like, hey, I know this guy, I know that guy. I think I know a little bit about hockey. At the end of the day, when you're running a National Hockey League team, you're running a really big business. There are a lot of balls in the air. You got to think about what's going on in Hershey. You got to think about what's going on with your ECHL affiliate, not to mention the draft and scouting and all these sorts of things that you need a really great crew around you to be successful. And one of the things I know about the Capitals is they have done that. President's Trophy winning, talking about winning a Stanley Cup, making it to the playoffs many times. That I think that sometimes us as Capitals fans, we take that for granted. Like, well, that's just what the Capitals do. And it is. That is what the Capitals do. But to be fair, there's a lot of NHL teams out there that don't have that kind of success. And I think it's important to really take that in and be lucky. And I think that the Capitals are sitting in a great position here with Chris Patrick behind the helm, or at the helm rather. In recent weeks, the Washington Capitals have indicated their desire to win with an active offseason. New general manager Chris Patrick aims to maintain a competitive team in DC for years to come, even after the Alex Ovechkin era is over and he retires from hockey. And, it seems like a no-brainer that you have to plan for this in advance, even though it is, potentially a couple years away, maybe a few years, depending on how his contract and if there's an extension shakes out. You can't wait until he hangs up to the skates to go, I guess we should figure out what we're going to do now. That you have to have your eyes set to the future. And what has changed about the Capitals as they have not mortgaged the farm for this win now mode? Something that has been very detrimental to this team for years, the perils of being in win now mode. They're learning from that. And it's a younger general manager. It is a younger head coach. They're heading in the right direction. Patrick emphasized his objective to be competitive, stating, "I do not enjoy losing, and I'm confident that we can move past the Ovechkin era with a competitive team." And the proof's in the pudding, as they say, is take a look at what Chris Patrick did, as he was one of the head guys that kind of ran things and called the shots for the Hershey Bears. Back-to-back Calder Cup wins. I think that speaks for itself. With 2 years remaining on Ovechkin's contract and him being 42 goals shy away from breaking Wayne Gretzky's all-time record, Patrick expressed his desire to avoid a rebuilding phase despite the team's aging core. And one of the things that he talked about is that sometimes there's teams that enter into this rebuild mode and they kind of stay there perpetually. They don't ever leave that. They're constantly changing things up, and sometimes they never find their way. On the flip side of the coin, there are teams that have done that on the fly and done a pretty good job. I've talked about that. And if you're an everydayer of the show, I've talked about that. The Rangers come to mind, where they sent out the letter to their season ticket holders saying, hey, buckle your seats. It's going to be rough here for a season or two, but this is all about what it's going to take to make this team competitive. Well, it wasn't even that long for the Rangers, and we can see what they did this past season, making it into the playoffs. And that's just one example that the Capitals, they don't necessarily have to go through such a painful rebuild. Patrick cautioned against the popular notion of rebuilding when superstars age, acknowledging the difficulty involved. He believes many teams struggle with a continuous cycle, like I spoke of, and they never find their way out. And I think that that's forward thinking. I think that is Ted Leonsis putting the right GM in place, even though Brian McClellan before him was not their first choice. That they have ultimately arrived at the right decision. Patrick also mentioned that the team has already made a strong statement with their offseason moves, which include acquiring Jacob Chikrin, Andrew Mangiapane, and Logan Thompson, while securing the signing of Matt Roy, Brandon Duhaime, and Taylor Radish. Big moves for the Capitals. Again, excitement abounds for me as I'm recording this in July about what the future holds for this team. I think that they did the perfect thing by making Chris Patrick the GM of this team, and the familiarity and the track record, it speaks for itself. I think the Capitals are in a really good spot. All right, so coming up here after the break, we will talk about how Terik Parisek signed his entry-level contract with the Capitals and what that means. I'll discuss straight ahead. Game Time is an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to first pitch. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, and views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets. And listen, guys, we've all been there. I'm going to get tickets to the baseball game. I'm going to do it. I forgot about it. Well, fear not, as tickets are actually cheaper closer to first pitch. Take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON. NHL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Have to turn down the volume with all the shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports today brings you the can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. All right, welcome back into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, coming to you guys with a bonus episode talking Capitals hockey in the summer on Locked On Capitals, and next talking about the Capitals selection at number 17 in Terik Parisek, a guy with a good upside. I think a player that not a lot of insiders or people that did mock drafts really saw coming. I'm going to be honest with you. That was not the selection that I saw coming, but all things considered, I think that he is the right player and a pretty good upside. The Capitals have officially signed a 3-year entry-level contract with right winger Terik Parisek, the team announced. The contract includes a maximum annual salary cap hit of $975,000. So I think that he is a ways out, of course, but I think the future is bright, and it kind of fits into the plans of what this team is going to be like in the post-Ovechkin era. This is an older team that's even transitioned to being younger, but they are going to be exponentially younger here in years to come as this aging core slowly peels away and the next wave of young Capitals arrive. Parisek, who was chosen 17th overall in the recent draft, was the sole first-round pick for the Caps. He had a surprisingly strong season in the WHL, registering 105 points, 43 goals, 62 assists, and 68 games with the Prince George Cougars. 43 goals, 62 assists. I'm loving it. Quite an accomplishment, despite playing just 4 games with the Cougars in the 22-23 season and spending the rest of the time with a U18 prep program. The 6-foot, 173-pound forward led all WHL rookies in goals and points. He also ranked 8th in scoring across the league. In recognition of his exceptional rookie performance, Parisek was named to the CHL All-Rookie Team with the WHL's BC Division second All-Star team. So there's a lot to like. And some of the things, the knocks on his game is that he's going to have to put on a little bit of weight. And that's not a real ding against him. That's pretty common with these younger guys that they come into being hockey players, at one point being National Hockey League players that they need to bulk up a little bit here. So talking about the analysis surrounding him. Despite his impressive statistics, Parisek did not receive as much pre-draft attention as anticipated. He was ranked 15th among North American skaters by NHL Central Scouting and was considered a consensus late first-round pick. TSN's Bob McKenzie placed him at 25 in his polling of NHL scouts, which made Washington's decision to draft him slightly earlier than expected. According to Elite Prospects 2024 NHL Draft Guide, there are significant concerns about Parisek's skating and his ability to carry the play on his own, especially during transitions. Skating, that is something that we also heard with Andrew Crystal as well. Listen, they're not first-round picks. This is a guy that was selected at 17. Some people had him projected later. Bob McKenzie, who's covered the sport a long time, projected him at 25. So you know that his game wasn't perfect. He is not a Celebrini. He's not a Bedard that these guys are going to have to grow into it. But the upside is there. And if you want to take a look at a good example, take a look at Ivan Miroshnichenko, for example. I mean, I know that's not an apples for apples comparison, but you take a look at a guy that really blossomed into a great hockey player with a lot of setbacks. So you take a look at a guy like Parisek, a little bit lower. If he bulked up, if he worked on his skating, he could be next level. So expectations and comments. Parisek is expected to be sent back to Prince George next season, which will probably postpone the start of his entry-level contract to the 25-26 season, allowing Washington to push back the start of his entry-level contract twice. Cougars head coach Mark Lamb remarked he is one of the smartest players I have ever coached. With a desire to get better every day, he has earned this, and the future is so exciting for the Prince George Cougars and the Washington Capitals. Here. And I think that, if you take a look a bit more at his footage when he was playing, I think there's a pretty good upside. Is there some things that need to get worked on? Yes. But again, that is why he was selected at 17 and wasn't a top 10 pick for that example. So talking about Parisek's reaction, he says, "I'm at such a loss for words," Parisek said after being drafted. "It's such an honor, just so excited for what's coming." And as Capitals fans, we are excited as well, as the future does appear to be bright. I'm talking about the drafts. The last few years here, I think this team has really had their eyes set for the future, that they need to restock and be ready, not to mention the players that are in Hershey as well, that are ready for next level. Talking Pierre Dubé, talking Ethan Frank, those kind of players that I think this team is going to be much, much better next year, but even better in years to come. All right, so coming up here after the break, we will talk about Leon Muggli and his new contract with the Capitals. Where does he fit in? I'll discuss straight ahead. All right, welcome back into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So talking about some draft picks and where they fit in with the Capitals. And it's an exciting thing to think about. You saw the players that are selected and where do they ultimately slot in. Leon Muggli's entry-level deal with the Caps. The Caps have signed defenseman Leon Muggli to a 3-year entry-level deal with an average annual value of $940,833. The team plans to loan him in the Swiss National League for the upcoming season to aid in his development. Again, a younger player, but he's there. And in years to come, I expect him to be a really great option. And one of the things that we know for sure is the Capitals have put a priority on the blue line, the defense, setting themselves up to be successful in years to come. I think that Leon Muggli fits the bill. Leon Muggli's background and skill set. Muggli, drafted in the second round by the Caps, is known for his composed and shutdown style of play. He emphasizes his awareness and high hockey IQ, possesses good decision-making skills, takes care of the puck, and plays intelligently in his own zone. He also has the potential to contribute offensively. Muggli describes himself as a defensive two-way defenseman with a solid first pass and strong skating ability. A really good upside. I like Leon Muggli's game, a two-way defenseman, a guy that likes to get involved in the offense. And some of the defensemen, the guys on the blue line, they necessarily aren't that way. I've talked here recently about Matt Roy, for example. He is a guy that, the offensive part of his game, that's not what he is known for. He prides himself in being that great defenseman. So it's good that the Capitals have multi-dimensional options on defense. Talking about Leon Muggli's leadership and experience, Muggli is recognized as a proven leader, having captained the Swiss teams he's been part of and exhibiting maturity beyond his years. He also competed against top-tier opponents and demonstrated his capabilities by excelling in the National League. And that's something that was apparent. And I saw that with Connor McMichael as well, and Connor Bedard last year, is that these young guys are far more mature than I was, let's say, at that age. That it's almost like being a mature person and a player at a certain age is all a part of your development. I think that years ago, it was concentrating on your skating. It was concentrating on puck handling and goal scoring. But now, being a professional right out of the gate, I think is something that is of paramount importance. And it seems like that is the case with Leon Muggli as well. And a maturity is a good thing at the end of the day. During his 42 appearances last season, Muggli scored 3 goals and provided 9 assists, leading all under 18 skaters in the National League. His 12 points set a record for the most points by a defenseman age 17 or younger in the league's history. So a lot of excitement surrounding these draft picks. Again, I will go into depth a little bit more about what kind of player these are. And then also on Monday's show, Justin Trudell from Nova Caps will join me once again as we continue to talk about the netminding situation. We talk about Chris Patrick. We talk about the Capitals acquiring Cap Friendly. So this is a good time of year to just talk about the many movements that have taken place this offseason, and there has been a lot. It all started with the Capitals acquiring Pierre-Luc Dubois, then Andrew Mangiapane, and then July 1st happened, and then we're talking about the draft, and all of that surrounded that, that it was a very busy time for the Capitals, and major improvements, all things considered. Some of those we expected. We saw the Capitals being active on July 1st. We know that the Capitals had several selections in this year's draft, and I think that they made some great selections. I think that, you know, if you take a look at July 1st and the days before that, they made some good choices. And then the icing on the cake was naming Chris Patrick as the new GM of the team. I'm hyped about it. I've heard some negative things out there, but I'm going to dismiss them as I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt. And not only the benefit of the doubt, his track record speaks for itself. The Capitals are in a good position. This team, I think, will be competitive in the fall. That's important. The leadership in place wants winning hockey back in DC, and that is what they will get. Listen, I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals, your only daily year-round podcast covering the Washington Capitals. And I want to thank all of you that listen on the audio side and watch this on YouTube. You are ultimately what makes this show successful. When you're done here, head on over to Locked On's 24/7 streaming channel, available on the free Amazon Fire TV channels app and on YouTube. But it doesn't end there. DC fans, there is a Locked On show on YouTube, an audio podcast on all the big teams around DC. So I am talking Commanders, I'm talking Wizards, I'm talking Nationals. If you're from the surrounding area, Baltimore Orioles, we're talking Ravens. There is a Locked On channel for you. So when you're done here, if you are a fan of one of those teams, like I'm a big Nationals fan, I listen to Locked On Nationals on the regular. And then also the big football team, Commanders, again, a little bit out from that. If you're an Orioles or Ravens fan or whatever big team, professional team and college team, Locked On has got you covered. Listen, once again, I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Dan Holme, and I'll talk to you again next time.